Hi, everyone. So in this session, we are going to talk about front-end in the age of AI. We're going to dive into what AI can do and can do actually very well, but also what it can't. And I'm going to use some examples from companies that run with AI coding in production, and I believe it's very, very interesting to learn from that. Let's see. How do I? Oh, sorry. Yes. So my name is Keren Fanan. As mentioned, I'm the co-founder and CEO of MyOp. MyOp is an open source library and a platform that connects externally generated code, mostly by UI, directly into live enterprise software. So over the past 15 years, I have been working in tech. I started as a product manager, I then became a general manager. I was a VP of product and today a founder. But the reality is that no matter the title, I always had the same job, a professional beggar, begging developers to build my ideas. Because that's the thing, if you're not a developer, if you're a product manager, a designer, even if you're a senior leader, you always need to have a developer fulfilling your ideas and making them a reality. And that's why AI is so exciting, because AI basically means I no longer have to beg, right? AI gives me something that is called agency. Agency is basically an extension to our working power. I can today code without knowing how to write code, right? That's super cool. So the ability to do more with less friction, that's what AI is all about. And that's why for people that are non-developers, that's super, super exciting. So I want to start with an example of a company called PickTime. So PickTime is a platform for developers, for photographers. We're here to talk about developers, but that's not the case. Platform for photographers, they exist for more than 10 years. They have tons of features, and their entire purpose is to help photographers to sell more. And they're quite successful in that. Oh, sorry. They had a case, a feature in their app that exists for something like 3 years, where the photographers can sell albums to their users through a pricing calculator. Their customers did not like that feature at all. The entire social network was full with complaints about the feature being super complex. Sorry. Complaints about the feature being too complex and about user not being able to use this feature whatsoever. So their designer reached out to Lovable, right? That's not new. We all know Lovable, Bold. There are many kind of prompt to design, prompt to web tools, and wanted to get an inspiration to how to fix that. With a simple prompt, the result was quite amazing. Lovable suggested a whole new way to build this tiered-based pricing calculator with discounts and everything. Lovable suggested to have a chart, something that they did not have before. So here, nothing is new. We all know that AI tools are first and foremost great for generating new concepts for existing features or even for new ones. Beside Lovables, there are a lot of other many tools. They tried all of them. The results were quite similar. I guess you know why. Most of these tools, Lovable, Bolt, V0, etc., they're all based on 3 leading models. We have OpenAI, we have Anthropic, we have the Google model. We also have DeepSync, but these are the most common 3, and this is why no matter which model you use for concepting, you will most likely get similar results. So in this case, they decided to continue with Gemini. So I have a concept now, but now I can take it with Gemini to build an actual prototype. So I'm no longer just asking for inspiration. I'm now prompting Gemini to build an actual HTML, CSS web page for me to have a working calculator, tiered-based calculator. And that's what the work with Gemini led us to. So now we have a new pricing calculator with tiers, with discounts, with checkboxes, with chart on the left, and all of that was built with Gemini. So it wasn't an easy task, right? The peak-time designer who worked on that feature had to go through back and forth with the chat to get to that result. The thing here with prompt engineering for non-developers is that it's not that complex. If you talk to the model the same way you talk to engineer when you want them to develop that, the results are quite amazing. So we had that back and forth, and we ended up getting this prototype. The team then actually took that prototype to their beta customers. They have some photographers that could see the features before they go live, which is also super cool because now I don't have to build this manually in Figma. I can use AI to do that, more feedbacks, and we have it. So let's take a look. A complete pricing calculator, tier-based, with discounts, all created end-to-end, inspired by Lovable, built by Gemini. We have tooltips here, checkbox, and everything. I think that's amazing, right? I mean, not a single line by a developer, all built with AI. So what's next? I think I'm not saying anything new, right? I mean, we use AI tools for concepting, we use AI tools for prototypes. In any normal company, the next stage will be to take that prototype to a developer for inspiration, and then developers will start and build that from scratch. But then we didn't really bring any change to the world, right? All of the AI buzz about anyone could build, about agency and stuff, and we end up building prototypes that eventually goes back to developers to build them from scratch, and may meet production in 2-3 weeks, depends on how fast they move. And I think the interesting part, and that's what we are here to talk about, is can we take these prototypes to production? Because behind that, there is a code that works. It looks great. It's built by AI, but by a machine, but that's also fine. And if we can do that, that's a whole new level of development. So in order to answer that, we actually have to dive into how feature works and the technology behind them. So the reality is every single feature that we work on is built from two distinct parts. The first part is the generic code. The generic code is basically the layer of code that is very common. I am referring to the user interfaces. I'm also referring to some basic GUI logics, animations, hover states, maybe drag and drops, scrolls, etc., etc. These things normally exist in any app that we know, but they are common because hover state is a hover state, and scroll is a scroll, and animation can be more complex, less complex, but it's the same thing. And interfaces mostly are obviously built with HTML, CSS. That's also quite generic. The second part of the feature is a proprietary knowledge, and that is the opposite of generic, right? That is exactly the secret sauce, the very IP-specific internal knowledge that each company has. And for that, we also need a very experienced engineer to be able to build that. These engineers need to have to go through an onboarding in the company and to know the exact specific area, whether it's fintech, mobility, whatever. So every single feature contains both. And what we discovered that is quite interesting, that in many cases, the generic part takes the majority of the development time. So if I have a complex UI, a beautiful screen, crazy animations, that could take weeks of development, although it does not require anything very unique from the developer. It just takes time. and the proprietary knowledge takes 20 to 40% of the time. And that's exactly the opportunity that we believe AI brings to the table. So back to the example, we worked with the Gemini. We have this tiered-based pricing calculator, much better than before. We have a working code. Now we need to connect this code to the already live working application, right? So there are a couple of ways to connect it. I can also always do a manual integration. I still, I have this code from Gemini. I can copy, paste it, and put a developer to start wiring the refs and props. It can work. It's also possible to use MyUp, which is my company. It's an open source, as I mentioned, open source library and a platform that does exactly that. There are other solutions in the market. But the idea is that for non-developers, designers, product managers, to actually build what used to be just prototypes with AI and then copy and paste them into the MyUp app, MyUp turns the Gemini, Claude, whatever code into a standalone component that then can be connected. The next phase will obviously be to release it to the users. So that could also be with A/B testing, gradual rollouts, or segmentation. So first we give it to QA, early production, and so on and so forth. And with one click, it's live. So now back to the PickTime app. Their users, and I'm talking about hundreds of thousands of photographers using this platform every day. They go to the app, they click on that pricing, and they get a designer-made code with Gemini, of course, live in production. Just like any other feature, they promoted a Facebook note about it, and great responses, great feedback. Users are happy. I can share that after they went live, they have received some feedback. So the same designer that built that feature went back to Gemini, prompt the AI to make changes, copy paste to Maya, publish, and it's live. So the entire cycle of feedback, changes, making things better no longer has to take weeks, right? It no longer has to compete with a lot of other features that we have in the pipe. So just to look on the new development process, okay? So, and that is, of course, a suggestion because there are so many tools for each stage. So we make the concepting and the design with Lovable, Bolt. There is also Base 44, Figma Make now working extremely well. We then use one of the models, Gemini, Claude. Maybe in the future also OpenAI will get better in generating code to generate the actual code. We then plug it into our working software because that's the idea, to make it live in production. The developer, the front-end developer, works on the internal logic, on the data structure, on the actual connection, and we have features live in production. The interesting part here that I think that the real innovation that AI brings into tech companies is that if we used to have the full stack developer, which is, front-end engineers now becoming full stackers, also doing some back-end. The reason the full stack engineer is more powerful than the front-end engineer is because there is less friction, right? The front end is less dependent on the back end, can do more. The same concept works for designers and product managers. They can now do more with AI. So a designer is not just designing, is actually handing off HTML, CSS, pixel perfect to the developer, and same goes for product managers. So the way we see the future of development with AI is that the front-end engineer becomes the full stack engineer working on core logics and mostly on the architecture. And the full stack designers and product managers are the one not just to design and work on specs, but actually building UI code and taking that all the way to production, but also doing experimentation, optimization, and closing the loop from the user back to the code and back to the user a lot faster than before. So back to the opportunity we talked about. The main shift that we see in responsibilities is, as I mentioned before, front-end engineers using copilots or not, completely up to them. I'm in favor of these tools. Working on the more complex things and validating them internally. But everything that has to do with the generic code, the UI aspects, the GUI logics, the things that are quite repetitive in a lot of the apps that we know and we see will be offloaded to the citizen developers, the full stack product managers, the full stack designers working with vibe coding tools. And all in all, what we're going to get is much better products and faster development. The next question is, how do we split basically between the engineers, designers, and product managers, who owns what? So for that, we created a model that is called the OEW. That model helps us and is expected to also help tech companies to decide for each feature how to split the responsibility. So O is for onboarding. How easy it is to understand that part of the code. Okay, if it's quite simple, then it's easier to offload that part to citizen devs and vibe coding tools, right? If it's very complex, if I need now to sit with a person for a whole week and bring them up to speed in order to develop that part, then it should probably stay with engineers. And one more critical thing here is the ability to validate the code, right? So if I'm building an interface and I can see it and I can validate it, that's great. If I'm building an internal logic or functionality and I have no way of knowing if the AI code makes sense, that's a problem. The second thing is exposure. How deep is the exposure to the internal IP, to the internal knowledge, to the internal concept? The bigger the exposure is, the more likely that piece of the code to stay with engineers. If the exposure is light, again, makes sense to offload to vibe coding tools. And then the W goes for who. After we have an answer to the onboarding, we have an answer to the exposure, we could decide who should own that part of the code. Again, whether we leave it to engineers working with Copilot tools to develop faster the logics and functionality, or we offload it completely to vibe coding and citizen devs. Let's take an example. So we had that calculator. So of course we talked about the UI, we talked about the GUI logics, but we also have the discount logic. That is an internal model from within the company that build a tiered-based discounts, depends on the type of the type of photographer, etc., etc. So that is quite complex onboarding, very high exposure to the internal knowledge and data of the company. So we will keep it with the engineer. When we talk about the interface, when we talk about the documentation, these are stuff that can be handed to designers, product managers. Okay, so this is how we basically build it. All in all, I can share that features that work according to this model can lead to 80% savings on development time and speed, which is insane. Okay, so a little bit more examples, and tips. So after that initial calculator, the same company, and I really find it to be mind-blowing, released 7 or 8 more projects. Very complex UI heavy, logic heavy features that were built by AI coding tools combined with internal and logic built by engineers. So we talked about the combination of Lovable for concepting and Gemini for the code. Sometimes Gemini doesn't work. I mean, you want the screen to look more pixel perfect to the brand. You have a Figma that you want to be close to it, and it just doesn't work. In this case, they also try to upload CSS to the Gemini to make it pixel perfect. The result was not good enough. So there is Figma Make. I don't know if you've heard about it. I guess you have. So Figma Make actually helps with both concepting, but it also allows us to take the code behind and upload that into one of the models, Claude or Gemini, to create more pixel perfect results. There are also tools like Anima, Builder.io, that sits exactly between the Figma to the code in a more pixel perfect way. From our experience, you normally still have to copy paste that into one of the models, Gemini or Claude, to get the full kind of code ready, including some logics, and to have a working prototypes. So in this example, the way they made it happen is that they took the screen that has a lot of tiles, they focused on one tile. The more you narrow down the problem to the AI, the results are better and more pixel perfect. So they perfect the one tile and then implemented the same style on all others and created the full screen. Each and every tile has behind it data and some information from the internal kind of database of PickTime. But the thing is that the entire UI was created again with AI. After an internal round of feedback, the marketing team wanted them to change it again. They went back to the model, back to having a pixel perfect screen. And why is that important? Because today, these entire cycles normally means that we have a developer working on some component, building it. We like it, we don't like it. It's not like the design. There is a lot of back and forth. And here, this entire cycle with AI tools bring us to a pixel perfect HTML, CSS without the developer in the picture. And that frees developers to work on critical things. What else we could do with AI? Of course, documentation and QA. So after we have a working prototype, it's quite easy to prompt the AI to build us a complete documentation and even a testing kit, which is quite cool, like you could see here. And also, in some cases, I guess you all know that you work with the chat on something, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and at some point, with everything you add, it breaks something else. So you want to add something to your component, but then something else breaks, and that's really annoying. So some things that we found to be helpful is to ask chat to find a way to make Gemini or Claude fix the issue. So here we ask chat to help us fix an issue with Gemini. He was happy to suggest a prompt for that. We copy paste that to Gemini, who of course apologized for the mistake, and we have a solution, which is crazy. So I think the most interesting part is in features like this one that has, the video is cracking a bit, that has extremely complex visual animations and behaviors that normally takes a whole bunch of time. And believe it or not, but with the right prompting, AI actually created all of that. So I think the key insight, besides what we could do with AI, is the understanding that AI is not just a tool, it's becoming another resource on the team. And because it's another resource on the team, it means the change is not just technical, but it's also organizational. So working with companies, what we see that there is a whole new layer of human resources. It's not just the human management, it's the AI resource management. So even for HR people, they need now to manage a whole new bunch of resources, which are the way we use these AI models. I'm gonna run through some concepts that works really well, that work really well in some companies. So if in the past we had squads of developer, designer, product managers handing off stuff from one to the other, we now have all of them prompting the AI to generate code together. It's quite helpful when they all work on the same account, actually. The same way that teams do weekly meetings together, we now need to have AI weekly meetings. In AI weekly meetings, we actually go through the output of the AI and discuss what worked and what didn't work, okay? In order to implement AI coding in working production environment, we need teams to communicate more, to collaborate more in order to make this thing work. So dedicated AI meetings, that's a part of the drill. And the last but not least, ownership. One of the things companies talk about a lot is if I'm not writing the code, let's say if a designer or product manager is prompting Claude to generate code and it's get to production, who owns the code if something goes wrong? So the rule we found to be working quite well is that if you generate the code, you own it. Okay, and this is why it goes back to what I mentioned. You better be able to validate what you're doing with AI. But with this concept, we can actually see companies already today, and I'm talking about companies with hundreds of thousands, with millions of users that use AI coding tools in production. And some of the people that are shipping this code are not developers. And if you would say that 2 years ago, 3 years ago, people would think we are crazy, right? But no, it's working today, and that's basically the future. So just recapping on the rules. Number one, AI is agency, is extension of our human power, and I think each and every one of us need to think, what is the agency that AI gives me? Number two, if you work with AI, validate it. The same way that you won't give, I hope, AI to write an email answer for you without even reading it. That goes back to code as well. Number three, it's not a tool. It's a resource. It's a teammate. It's something that joins the way we work on the day-to-day. And when you understand that, it gives you a lot of power. That's it. I don't know how many of you already work in companies or is going to start, but I think it's a very, very interesting era to start working in tech with the AI tools. I think it's completely different than what we saw years ago, and it's all because of AI. That's it. I will have 6 minutes. Sure. Any questions? I guess it was all very, very clear.
So maybe I'll ask a question. In the list of OEW that you shared earlier, where does security or compliance, those kind of things feature? Because that's a lot of domain knowledge, and if you've been a seasoned developer for 5 years, 10 years, you develop that over that period of time.
Yeah.
How does that feature in something that's done in that way?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the question around security. So I think security and AI, that is one of the kind of major challenges, regardless of the tool that you use. Okay, I was here referring to external tools that you work with and then copy, paste, or plug the code to production. But we also, of course, have the cursor and Copilot and all the models that run on the code and generate more code. And there is the question of security as well. So in general, when we want to embed kind of AI into our coding, there is a question of security. Luckily, a lot of people are now handling that exactly. In our company, when we plug externally generated code into live production, we keep it in isolated. So it's basically in isolation from the core code. We create a communication that is safe, but we don't embed the code. So that's one way of dealing with security. So I'm saying, okay, if it was written by AI and not by a seasoned developer, then I'm going to keep it out of my core code base. So that is one way. I can say that there are a lot of solutions also for the cursors of the wall that run on the stack, and they are embedded into the code. So there are ways to handle that. I think that the OEW refers more to how do I know which part of the code can be offloaded not just to AI tools, but to AI tools and non-developers. So I'm talking about the external tools. They don't have the context. They don't have access to the repo. They basically know nothing about my company. When peak time, when their designer went to Gemini and prompt Gemini to build that calculator, Gemini knew nothing about peak time. Their users, their stack. I don't think probably they told him they are using Vue.js. But the thing is that they have no access, they have no context, and still they can generate. More questions? Cool. Yes.
Which way do you see it going more? Is it going to be, will be more full stack designers, or will developers move into the design space using AI?
That is a great question. I think that I was thinking about it also myself today, and I think that it very depends on the type of developer. I think we will see some front end developers becoming more product managers working with vibe coding, or focusing on the design aspect. And I think we will see more front ends becoming more full stack developers doing also back end, and becoming better at that with AI, because they also have agency now, right? They also have cursor to help them become a better backend if I only did front end until today. So I think it very much depends on the type of developer and the acumen. I had the opportunity of working with front end engineers that had an amazing product acumen, and I could see how with the right tools they will move towards that direction of designing and thinking about the users and what they want, and how do I close that loop from code to production, feedback, and back. And I think there will be some that will move to the other side. Great. Thank you.